The Madrigals' gifts are fascinating, aren't they? Each family member possesses a unique ability that makes life in the village magical and special. However, when watching Encanto, it's hard not to wonder if these powers are as simple as they seem. Apparently, each Madrigal's gifts manifest in response to emotions, as if emotions were the fuel that ignites the magic within them. And when we think of Pepa, this connection with emotions becomes even more evident, as her power to control the weather seems directly linked to how she feels. But is that all? What if Pepa's gift was much more than just an emotional reaction? What if she actually had the potential to consciously control the weather, but never learned to fully use this ability due to family pressures and expectations to keep everything perfect? Throughout the movie, we see scenes suggesting that the relationship between emotions and the Madrigal's gifts might be more complex, and Pepa may be the most intriguing example. Let's dive into this theory and explore whether Pepa's true gift goes beyond her emotions, and how the Madrigal's own gifts can spontaneously manifest during moments of intense pressure. Are you ready to see Pepa from a new perspective? If we analyze the Madrigal's gifts, it becomes clear that they respond to emotions, but that does not mean they are consciously controlled. Whenever the characters experience intense emotions, their gifts seem to come to life on their own. For example, think of Isabella, Mirabel's sister, who was pressured to be the perfect daughter. For most of the film, the flowers Isabella created were flawless, just as expected of her. However, when she expresses a long-repressed anger, she discovers she can generate not only flowers, but also a variety of wild plants, thorns, and even cacti, something entirely outside the perfect standard she forced herself to maintain. This sudden change in Isabella's powers indicates that, although the gifts are influenced by emotions, the way they manifest is not necessarily controlled by the characters. Emotions serve more as a trigger for the power, rather than a button they can press at will to decide what happens. Another interesting example is Camilo. In a scene where the family learns about Bruno's vision, Camilo is taken by such surprise that his transformation ability goes out of control, shifting into various forms, including Bruno himself and even strange figures. If he had total control over his gift, why would he spontaneously transform into the missing uncle, a sensitive subject in the family, or make a distorted expression at such an important moment? These examples suggest that the Madrigal's gifts are triggered by emotions, but are not guided by them. And this brings us directly to Pepa, whose emotional connection with her power is the most evident. The Madrigal family was created with the mission to use their gifts to benefit and protect the village. This responsibility was passed down from generation to generation, with Abuela always emphasizing the importance of being strong and maintaining the appearance of perfection. For Pepa, who is naturally emotional and expressive, this environment created enormous pressure for her to learn to control her gift and avoid unwanted weather changes. After all, a simple nervousness from Pepa could trigger a storm over the village, unlike Julietta's gift, who only needed to prepare a delicious meal to heal someone. Or Bruno, who just had to report his visions. Pepa's gift required constant emotional control. This put her under much greater stress, as she needed to repress her emotions to avoid causing drastic weather changes. For example, when she is visibly nervous before dinner, her mood almost instantly affects the weather, forming a storm cloud above her head. This shows that, instead of controlling the gift, she is constantly trying to contain it. This forced control may have prevented Pepa from exploring the true potential of her gift. If from a young age she was pressured to avoid negative feelings to not provoke unwanted weather changes, it limited her instead of helping her develop a complete understanding of her power. After all, how could a child learn to master such a complex gift if the first step was to hide her own emotions? Throughout Encanto, we see a gradual transformation in how Pepa deals with her emotions and, consequently, with her gift. One of the most revealing moments occurs in the final scene when the casita is rebuilt, and the Madrigal family's magic returns. As the family enters the new house, Pepa, who is clearly happy and filled with joy, spontaneously creates hail that gently falls around her and Felix while they dance together. This scene may seem trivial at first glance, but it carries a deep meaning. For the first time, we see Pepa play with her gift instead of fighting against it. The hailstorm, which emerges as she joyfully dances, indicates that the weather now responds to her in a more harmonious way. The fact that the hail is not violent or out of control, but arises in a moment of happiness, suggests that Pepa has begun to enjoy her power rather than fear it. She is no longer trying to hide or suppress her emotions to keep the weather stable. On the contrary, she is embracing the fact that the weather can reflect her mood more gently and controllably. This change can be compared to Isabella's journey, who also begins to explore new possibilities with her gift when she frees herself from the expectations of perfection. When Isabella stops creating only flawless flowers and starts experimenting with exotic and thorny plants, she discovers a new and more expansive side to her power. Similarly, Pepa seems to discover that the weather does not have to be a chaotic force beyond her control, but can be shaped and manipulated according to her emotional state, a more subtle and intuitive form of control than she believed possible. Another piece of evidence for this evolution is the fact that, at the end, Pepa shows no signs of trying to hide or apologize for the falling hail. Throughout the film, whenever the weather became unstable, she seemed to feel guilty or ashamed, especially in front of Abuela. But now, the joy she expresses while dancing under the hail shows that Pepa has finally accepted her gift as part of who she is, rather than something she needed to suppress. Therefore, it is possible that, during the events of Encanto, Pepa began to learn how to consciously channel the weather through her emotions, rather than just being a victim of circumstances. The reconstruction of the casita and the renewal of family bonds symbolize a new era for the Madrigal, where each member can explore their gifts without the constant pressure to be perfect. For Pepa, this may mean the opportunity to freely experiment with her gift for the first time, discovering the true extent of her power. The Madrigal family's journey in Encanto shows us that the family's magical gifts go beyond simple abilities. They reflect who the characters are and how they deal with their emotions and the expectations around them. Pepa, in particular, exemplifies this relationship in a unique way. Throughout the film, her gift of controlling the weather appears as an immediate manifestation of her emotions, suggesting that the power may seem out of her control. However, upon closely observing the scenes where the weather responds to the Madrigal's emotions, it becomes clear that the gifts are not simply controlled by emotions, but are triggered by them, reacting in ways that do not always correspond to conscious control. The pressure exerted by Abuela for the Madrigal family to be perfect and use their gifts for the good of the village certainly influenced how Pepa deals with her power. From an early age, she was encouraged to hide or control her feelings to prevent drastic weather changes, which prevented her from truly exploring the potential of her gift. But throughout the film, with the rediscovery of family bonds and the return of magic, Pepa begins to free herself from these restrictions. The final scene, where she enjoys the hail while dancing with Felix, shows that, perhaps for the first time, she is learning to accept her gift and explore its possibilities without fear. This leads us to question, did Pepa really never have control over the weather? Or was she always capable of doing much more than she imagined, but was limited by expectations and the fear of making mistakes? With the casita's renewal and the strengthening of the family, maybe Pepa is just beginning to discover the true extent of her ability, and what once seemed to be an uncontrolled reaction to her emotions could become a more conscious and intentional power. It leaves us with a thought. In the future, if there were a continuation of Encanto, would we see Pepa control the weather even more precisely, perhaps even altering seasons or manipulating the atmospheric time beyond immediate emotions? Or will her feelings always be an essential and inseparable part of how the weather responds to her? Either way, Pepa's evolution indicates that the Madrigal's gifts can be much more than magical tools. They are dynamic and complex expressions of who they really are. So, what do you think? Did Pepa already have the power to consciously control the weather, or will it always be a matter of emotions on the edge? Share your ideas and theories, and let's continue unraveling the mysteries of Encanto together.